trying to save them separately. Did anybody come from the back, from behind the building at all? Anybody come up that way? Putting a window in the office. It's so dark back there. So dark. So we're putting a big window back there. It's going to be that we opened up the wall. The window goes in next week. It's so nice. When we opened up that wall, the light back there was just terrific. It's all southern exposure. So it'll be light in there all day. You can come and hang out. It'll be very bright. Bright back there. So the sign says, and this sign, this is like a regular sign. It like shows up probably, well, it shows up every 24 weeks. It shows up. Able response, responsible. The lesson is, again, it's a lesson that it will be somewhat familiar because we do a lesson on this particular principle every 24 weeks. Just happens that way. That's how it goes. And if you're keeping track of it stepwise, this would be step 8, if that's the way you want to look at it. If you want to just, but you don't have to look at it that way, as we'll see as we go through. So and I tried to bring the lesson today around to be more focused on this idea of mindfulness and how we really have an ability to work with these beliefs, thoughts, feelings, actions in a way that maybe in the past we haven't thought about. So first, there's an underlying principle that goes along with this step, and it's strength, and it's the strength to be able to take responsibility for our own lives. And this is the strength is not of the personality. This strength that we have to call on to be able to do this is not. It's really not of the ego, that separate self that we've been the separate self that changes from moment to moment, but that we think is a constant, and the thing that we're so involved in it doesn't really have. Well, first of all, the doctors can't find it in your brain, and when we really pay attention, we can't find it in ourselves. We just find that there's an observer who's kind of watching this self. But still, that doesn't keep us from being very self-involved. And of course, then, that is the cause of the suffering. It's where all the suffering rises from. So, but there's a strength in us that is actually trying, it's part of this larger organism that we're a part of. It's trying to manifest through us. It's trying, it wants to come forth. From us. And it generates from unity with a capital U. It generates from the unity of all life. It generates from this greater thing that we're a part of. And the strength in us, really, we should look at it like it's a great good fortune. I mean, to think about it that way, to establish some gratitude for it, it actually comes to us in a much more manifest way when we surrender to the common welfare. When we stop thinking about, sometimes you get up in the morning and there's so much in front of you, and there's maybe so much left undone from yesterday and so many things that have to be tended to that we think that we're not going to be able to get through it because it's just too much. I don't know how I'm ever going to do all of this today. Or maybe it could actually just be one overwhelming thing. The rest of the stuff has fallen off to the side, and this one monolithic thing is just like standing in our consciousness. But the way to access the strength is to stop worrying about how ourselves individually are going to do these things and surrender to the common welfare, to surrender into that entity that's actually supplying the strength to us. So, because what's going on is creation has an interest in us, and it actually has a role and an idea about, and you could call it an ideal about us, that our potential benefits creation. And so it invests this overflowing abundance of strength in us. And this strength is the ability for us to do what is called for in life. This strength is not puffed up. This strength is really it's actually humble. But it is confident. It is confident in itself, and it generates more confidence in us when we attach to it. So it's something that we can actually take refuge in. This is another mindfulness practice, is when we're feeling overwhelmed by anything, to have this little have a little saying ready to say, I take refuge in strength. I take refuge in God. I take refuge in Buddha mind. I take refuge in Christ consciousness. I take refuge in love. And there's a whole list of things, and then to say it, and then to allow. See, once thought, this is one of the keys to this lesson today, is that once the thought occurs, a reaction happens in the body. Emotions are generated. So even saying, sometimes we will say something like, I take refuge in love, but we're feeling very unloved. And so we get two very quick thoughts that come in succession. One may be, oh, that's just not true. There's nothing there for me, right? And that spits out some kind of chemical reaction into the system. But then also there's some part of us that hears that as it's the truth, and it gives something. And if we can continue to say these things, that more positive charge will have more control over our state of mind. So these things are, so what's going on is that Spirit is continually trying to renew our ability to deal with whatever might occur. So because of that, we can relax, let go of any worry. This doesn't mean that we relax and think that Spirit is going to do it for us. It's just that it helps the state of mind to relax and let go of the worry, and then when whatever needs to be done is presented, then we can do it. So this power is at work in us, and it's calling more and more of our good into manifestation as we access it. But if we don't, it just seems like more and more frustrations are happening. So we should be expectant. We should first thing we should know is going to happen is that life, our experience of life in the physical world, is always going to entail pain. Pain is always coming. It is always coming. And as a result of pain coming, we are from time to time going to suffer. But we don't have to continue in our suffering. So we can first of all know that this is just the truth. And there never will come a point in this physical life where pain will not show itself from time to time. But with good practice, the amount of time we spend in suffering can shrink. But the other thing that we can be expectant about is the good that is always there and available. So trials and troubles will come every day. We can expect them, accept them, and then move on. Sometimes we find ourselves worrying. We worry about impending things. We worry about a whole bunch of stuff that's not impending, but we think it's impending. It could turn out this way. That could happen. This could happen. Oh, did I make a mistake on this? And we're worrying about it usually at the most inopportune times, when we actually have no power to do anything about any of the things. Like when you're laying in bed getting ready to go to sleep. So we may be anxious or concerned about the outcomes of a particular situation, but these thoughts are really negative prayers. All of these worries are really negative prayers, and they have an effect. They have an effect in the physiology. They have an effect. It's not just in the mind. They're secreting. These thoughts are secreting things into the body at the same time. So when worry and anxiety come, we can just note them. Just note it. Just say, oh, worrying, thinking, judging. Just a thought, a word to remind us. This is what I'm doing. I'm now observing. I'm worrying. And you observe it without, like when you make the observation, we try to observe it without attaching emotion to the observation. We even observe an emotion from an unemotional point of view. And then that's when we really start to see that this self that is so emotional really isn't us. That it's something we're involved in, it's something we're messing with, but it's really not us, because we can actually observe it from over here, and we're not all caught up in the drama of the whole thing. So we change our mind, because we can change our mind because that's always within our power. We look for and expect right outcomes. So yes, there's a situation. So I expected a situation. I remind myself, didn't you just say to expect situations? Yes, I expected a situation. Now what I'm going to expect is a right outcome. But the way I'm going to get to the right outcome is I'm going to take action that is appropriate, action that comes from guidance. So when in any day there's bound to be challenges and difficulties, and we expect to move over and through them. No matter what may occur, no matter what may appear, we remember that what's going on is, now, okay, here it is. Now this next moment, this is the opportunity. And this is where the strength comes to bear, is in the next opportunity to do the thing that we need to do. So, okay, all right, mistakes were made. Every day, today on the racquetball court, we got done on the racquetball court. Usually, almost every time I play, when I come out and sit down, I can say, mistakes were made. In the losses, right? Mistakes were made. But today, the other team was saying mistakes were made. Nice. So, but mistakes were made. Every day we make them. We make them every day. And usually what we do is we indict ourselves continually afterwards for a very long time over some mistake that really wasn't that big of a deal. And even if it was a big deal, continually feeling guilty about it is not going to be helpful. So there will be many times where we will make errors. And sometimes, this is where the 8 step comes in, right? It's here in the whole thing, but here's where it really comes in. Sometimes other people are hurt as a result of our actions, or perhaps our inaction. Left untreated, these past wounds keep us from living fully in the present. This is where life is. Life is now. Life is in the present. If I'm not taking care of those things that I've done in the past that have hurt people, if I've not tried to put them to rest, they're going to continue to come back to my mind over and over again and keep me from living in the present. So we're strong enough to take responsibility for the mistakes of the past. A mistake is just an error that can be corrected. Now, there are some mistakes that the direct result of the mistake can never be corrected. I mean, if somebody dies as a result of our mistake, we can't make them not dead. But there is still healing. This is the thing that needs to be focused on. We may think, the other thing is very interesting, is that we may think that there are mistakes that we made that can never be healed, that can never be corrected, and actually they can be. If we open ourselves to this process. So, mistake, an error can be corrected. First, we see our part. We see our part. We just observe. We see our part. Not blaming anyone else to make ourselves feel better. Now, this is not to say that the other person might not have had a part, but this is not what we're concerned with right now. What we're concerned with is, what was our part? Because it's just too easy, it's just too convenient to look at the other person's part and say, that's why. Yes, I did this and that, but they did this. This is not helpful. This will never heal the situation. We'll never get out of it. So we are only responsible for what we do, not for the actions of others. So rather than feel trapped, always doomed to repeat these past mistakes, we can see that by doing this, we can change the patterns of the past, because the patterns of the past are always about me saying, it's not my fault. It's not my fault. It's not my fault. I'm being unfairly treated. That's why I did that thing, was because I was being unfairly treated. Now, a lot of times we don't even consider that we did something to someone who was totally innocent of the thing, but we were being unfairly treated somewhere else, so we had to do something over here to try to save ourselves. Many of you know what I'm talking about. Some of you don't, but many of you do. So we change these patterns by taking responsibility in the present for those results. That brings us into the present. Right now, I'm just going to take that responsibility. So then we have these, we have these emotions. We have these feelings. And we are responsible for our emotions. I know we don't want to. Now, this is a theme that we've talked about many times. I try to like shift it just a little bit to maybe, if we think about it from a different perspective, maybe there'll be some different help here. So reaction is a result of emotion. We allow these feelings, these emotions, to motivate us into reacting to various things that occur. We also use feelings as an excuse to not take appropriate action. So emotions have led us to rash actions, bad decisions, and resulted in many lost opportunities. When we begin to be mindful of our emotions, not repressing or denying them, we accept. We accept. We're open. We accept the emotion. We gestate. We allow it to like do whatever it's going to do within us. This is like really important. But my first tendency when a strong emotion comes, if it's a pleasant emotion, I want to grab onto that rascal and just hold on for dear life. I do not want this pleasant thing to go away. If it's a negative emotion, I want to push it away from me as fast as I can. This is just a natural reaction. So it's just how we're kind of wired to do this. But so instead of that, to accept, to notice, to see it, and let it sit. Just let it sit right there. And this is like really important, that first idea, and this is what Gary Renard says in this little model of forgiveness, is first don't do anything. Just stop yourself. Don't do anything. Just let it be and see what it is. And then something more appropriate will come to mind. So we let it gestate, and then we move into proper action. We move into appropriate action, or many times it could actually be that we don't do anything. We just move on to the next thing, because guess what? There's going to be a next thing. It's coming. The next thing is coming. It's on the way. So we can do something different than we've done in the past. I'm sure we've all heard it said, and we've mentioned it here many times, that it's like a thing that people actually think it's true, but it's not. You can't help how you feel. You can't help how you feel. That's why I want to say you can help how you feel. Well, I can't help how I feel about it. Yeah. Yes. But only through practice, only through a little bit of work. So yes, you feel a certain way right now in this moment. Stop. Feel it. Let it gestate. And see what happens. It'll change. So we're not tied to those emotions. They actually will pass very quickly if we just allow it to happen. So we examine our thoughts then that have led. So it's our thinking here now. Okay, so now it's our thinking. And this is where it gets really interesting now in the light of mindfulness. Because we are paying attention to what we are thinking, we will really see how all this stuff is working. So we're responsible for our thinking, responsible for our thoughts, and our thoughts are the things that trigger feelings. And this is very interesting when we watch. I have a thought, and depending upon its quality, it will generate a feeling. And then, though, what then happens is it generates a feeling, and that feeling, in turn, triggers another thought, which will actually generate another feeling. And so it's like a cascading kind of effect. So, okay, so let's say this is what the Buddha called this, that there's two arrows. There's the arrow of the original pain, that something happens that causes you pain. And then there's the second arrow, which is your reaction to the pain causes more pain. So if we pay attention to what's going on, we really see that this is, and many times we will have a pleasant thing occur, and then we will actually shoot an unpleasant arrow at ourselves because we, for some reason, think we don't deserve the pleasant thing. So there's some other disconnect that occurs that cause a negative reaction in us. So probably don't have any direct control over the thought as it comes to us. At least not, I think, for a long time until you turn into the Dalai Lama or something. But we immediately have control after the thought presents itself. And this is the place where we want to use the strength, right? So what we do next, we have the ability to change our thinking. And we can't stop a thought before it comes, but we can decide what to do with it once it does come. And then anytime a negative or unwanted thought comes, we can decide to change our mind and install a more positive thought. And doing this over time, so there are thoughts that occur to us, and this is directly related to this idea of making amends to those that we've harmed, is that when we remember a painful situation that where we harm someone and it causes, and when we think about it today, it still causes pain, we can actually train ourselves to apply a loving memory over the top of that thought so that eventually it will become more associated. Now, this takes a little bit of work, but there may be a bunch of them. There actually could be a bunch of them. But we start with what we got. We work a little bit at a time with this. And the biggest recurring regrets that come to mind, we need to figure out what kind of a positive emotion or memory that we can overlay over the top or associate with it so that we can escape the suffering that occurs. Now, one of the things that we're going to do to escape the suffering is we're going to take responsibility for the thing and do whatever we can to heal it. But still, from time to time, regrets will come to mind. And we can, through this power of mindfulness, change how we react over time. Not just change, and this is not just about changing the thought. What I'm talking about here is if we do this, we will change the way that we feel in the body. Not just the distressful thoughts, but the actual physical feelings and the physical symptoms, the sicknesses, the various disorders that happen in the body as a direct result of our feelings and our thoughts, because they really are connected. Whenever fearful thoughts occur, I say no to this. I don't want this. I do not want this. Not no to it, I'm not going to think it. No to it, this is not the thought I want. This is not the thought I want. And if you're practicing Course in Miracles, you would say to the Course in Miracles, or you say to the Holy Spirit, I don't want this thought, give me another thought. It's another technique. It'll work perfectly. This thought I don't want, give me another one. Another one will come. So we take responsibility for our thinking, and then we find out that what's really going on is there's this group of thoughts in our brain, this belief system that's in operation all the time. And there's a group of thoughts. It's a thought system both based on genetics and environment. Now, this belief system is not just because we read some bad books or saw some bad movies or there was too much violence in whatever we observed in the movies or television or whatever. That has something to do with it. But the thought system is first of all, it's part of what in the old days they used to call race mind. And it doesn't mean racist. It meant race mind meaning inherited values. Freud called it the superego. This is what comes from society. So we have this whole group of things that come from society. Then we have the genetic part of it. We have the whole thing that our bodies actually evolved. If you think about it, the body evolved. All of our bodies evolved in a way that make us have a negative bias. Because if you think about when really survival was tough, you couldn't make a mistake. You couldn't make at least a big mistake and live when we were like in the wilderness, right? So the mind developed so that negative things are very important, and our focus goes really big onto negative things because that was like survival. You got to focus on this negative stuff, and the good experiences, they kind of slide off. So the negative experiences we're evolved, so the negative experiences are like Velcro, and they stick, and the positive experiences are like Teflon, and they slide off. But through mindfulness, we can change this because we're actually not running from lions anymore. We can make some mistakes and not have it kill us. So this belief system then also, it has to do with our environment. Really important to understand, if we hang out in environments where everything is negative and there's all kinds of negative stuff going on, that is going to have an effect on us. Whether that's in the workplace or whether that's where we go for our socializing, even toxic family situations. These things have an effect. They affect they get in there underneath the conscious thought. So this belief system is a system based on genetics and environment. We're hardwired to this negative bias based on our evolution and our upbringing, because somewhere a long time ago we got an idea that we were separate from the rest of life. Now here's this, so we thought and we entered a conflict that continues to this day. Now, it could very well be, because we don't know for sure, that we actually, the world, the way, I mean, it's just part of evolution, it was a conflict. It was a conflict. We had to struggle to survive. Or you could go back farther than that and think that we have a larger mind that we share, and when we split that larger mind, we decided to design the world to be that way. It really doesn't matter. Really doesn't matter for these purposes, because if we want to get over it, if we want to make it better, then we need to use these practices to train ourselves to not react this way anymore, to change these belief systems. We may have believed in the ultimate isolation of life. We may have believed in lack. We may have believed that we are less than, and you fill in the blank, less than someone, less than capable of taking care of the situation. We may have believed in the unreliability of the universe or creation or God to care for us. So, but today we can examine these beliefs in the light of that larger unity. And knowing that we are part then of this larger organism, we can begin to dismantle the thought system. We can begin to let go of these fear thoughts. Because belief is actually the cause of all this distress. It's the cause of fear. It's the cause of aggression. It's the cause of paralysis. It's the cause of all of this ongoing suffering. So we apply some affirmations, some alternate thoughts. We say I'm one with life. We can think I'm never alone. We can believe I'm part of creation. Because the fact is that we are responsible for our lives, and nobody else is going to take this responsibility. So here's where I might have mentioned this last week, but this Buddhist practice that we've just been studying, in and of itself, is non-theistic. Non-theistic. That means it's not, the Buddhists do not concern themselves with whether or not there is a God. So many people think Buddhists are atheists. That's just not the case. The way Buddhist practices, the question doesn't even come to mind. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter, because the whole idea is to use mindfulness practice to get to the place where we can alleviate suffering in ourselves, suffering in others. And so what ends up happening if the practice is pure is we actually end up being of service to this larger thing, which we might call God, or which we might call the larger organism. And then you can even go further with it and say there's this thing that we're all a part of, and I call it divine mind most of the time. You can call it God mind or whatever, but it's actually, in the Buddhist philosophy, it's called the ground of being. The ground of being. So I have this saying, I understand that God stands under all. The Buddhist way of thinking about it would be, I understand that the ground of being stands under all. So this ground of being, this is the part of us that is greater than the body. This is the part of us this is why we're part of each, however you look at this from a theistic or a non-theistic viewpoint, the ground of being is actually what we were talking about earlier in the meditation, is actually the presence of God, that is the overarching thing. This is the eternal thing, being. This is beyond the physical world. And this is where, this is, by the way, and being totally involved in being would be the total state of non-duality. We are all just one being. We no more thought about us and them, me and you. So, okay, so responsible for life. To stay aware in the present moment, we can see clearly that we're in charge of our lives. We may not be responsible for past, and this is very important. First of all, to stop thinking about blame. We may actually be able to make a case, very big, good case for saying, I'm to blame for this, or someone else is to blame. This is just totally not helpful. There may be many situations that I'm not even responsible for. And I need to see that. I'm not responsible for that, but I am responsible for this. We may not be responsible for some past events or circumstances, but we are certainly responsible for what we do now. So then we see clearly that every belief, thought, feeling, action is under our direct supervision. This is what we want to make. It is under our direct supervision, but we are letting it pass by, unsupervised. We're just letting it stream by, and we are just reacting back and forth with feelings and you know, all of the unfortunate things that continue the suffering. What we want to do is bring it more under our, to actually manage it, to actually be supervising it. We can also see that where we are right now, really, where we are right now in our, as far as our how we feel about things, how our life experience is a direct result of every thought, word, action, or inaction that we have participated in up until now. Does not help us to blame circumstances. Doesn't help us to blame events for that present reality. We have an internal locus of control. When people go to therapy, they find this is one of the things that they look for. If people are thinking that the reason that their life is a mess is because of all the bad things that have happened to them and continue to happen, they call that an external locus of control. That something outside of them is actually, they think, if we're in that state of mind, that something outside of us is controlling our life experience. We have an internal locus of control, which we can take, and when we decide, when we decide to do that, then we see very clearly that we get to decide what to do. So it's no one's fault. So we stop blaming parents. This is what Ken Wapnick said about this. He said, we made it so convenient. We decided to have parents. Stop blaming parents, teachers, friends, enemies, frenemies, anyone else for our troubles. This may seem fearful at first to take this responsibility, but if we understand that it frees us, actually frees us to create the life that we really want. It frees us to alleviate suffering in ourselves and in others. It frees us to have a fulfilled life.